All right, everybody, and we are back with some fresh content following the 2023 NFL season finally reaching its conclusion. And today, I want to talk about a specific player, a current player, and let's be real, probably the best player, and that is none other than Patrick Mahomes II. Um, and wow, he has been probably my favorite player in the league since he took the league by storm back in 2018. He really did have a revolutionary effect on the league and how we viewed the game. So I do want to talk about him today and all that he's achieved. And also, I wanted to make this video because I've seen a lot of talk following Super Bowl 58 about how he's maybe one of the best quarterbacks ever to play the game already. And I've seen plenty of big names in the media claiming that he's maybe even the number two quarterback all time behind Tom Brady, or even the number three quarterback behind Tom Brady and Joe Montana. So I wanted to do a little bit of a research here today and do a bit of a deep dive on Patrick Mahomes to see if that really is the case, or are people just being swept up in the moment, which is very easy to do. I don't blame them. So let's look here at Patrick Mahomes' stats first. Well, say his stats and his accomplishments so far in his career. So, looking at his regular season numbers here, he has started 6 seasons in the National Football League. All 6 of them, obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs endured so much success where they made it to at least the conference championship game. And he comes in 2018, starts all 16 games, throws 50 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, over 5,000 yards, and wins the league's MVP and Offensive Player of the Year, first team All Pro honors. And this was pretty much unforeseen by anybody. I mean, a lot of people were considering Patrick Mahomes to be a bit of a reach when the Chiefs traded up for him in 2017. Um, Obviously, the Bears infamously took Mitchell Trubisky ahead of him, and a lot of people thought the Chiefs were even going to target Deshaun Watson with that selection instead of Mahomes. But they do take Patrick Mahomes. He leads the Chiefs to a 12-4 record. His, I wouldn't say rookie year, but his first year as a starter. They make it all the way to overtime in the conference championship game, where they lose to, of course, Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Then in 2019, starts 14 games, missed a couple games due to injury, but 11-3 record as a starter, over 4,000 yards passing, 26 to 5 touchdown interception ratio, finishes fourth for Offensive Player of the Year, and he ends up leading the Chiefs to their first Super Bowl in exactly 50 years following the 2019 campaign. So things are definitely looking up for Patrick Mahomes, and really it just keeps on rolling for him and the Chiefs. In 2020, the COVID year, starts 15 games only because they didn't even need him to start that last game. They had their playoff positioning already secured. Finishes with 4,700 passing yards, 38 touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions. Finishes third in the league MVP voting, second team All Pro, um, second in Offensive Player of the Year yet again. And of course, this was the year where they lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Super Bowl 55 at Tampa Bay Stadium against, once again, Tom Brady. So coming out of that 2020 season and really into the 2021 campaign, there was certainly a narrative that the Chiefs were becoming exposed and defenses had figured out how to stop Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense. The Bucks had kind of put that blueprint out there, and certainly in the beginning of the 2021 campaign, a lot of teams were mimicking that strategy used by the Tampa Bay Bucks in Super Bowl 55 to really be able to get pressure onto Patrick Mahomes while still being able to negate the deep ball, which teams have really struggled with in 2018 and 2019, and really 2020 before the Super Bowl. The Chiefs would constantly be going against single high safety looks, and when teams would try to blitz Mahomes, he would just use that rocket of an arm, throw it right over everybody, usually to Tyreek Hill, but not always. But come 2021, teams were neutralizing the deep ball. They were getting to Mahomes, forcing him to make bad decisions. And his stats definitely took a bit of a dip, but the Chiefs were able to adjust. Andy Reid was able to tinker with the offense midseason, make some adjustments along with Eric Bieniemy and the rest of that offensive staff at the time. And they were really able to sort of evolve that Kansas City offense into what it's become today, where it's more about the short game. It's more about just taking what the defense is going to give you. And I think that's really where we saw Patrick Mahomes really take another step from becoming, well, I should say transforming from, yeah, he's super talented, superbly talented, and he's able to just make things happen based off his raw talent alone to, okay, now he still has that. That hasn't gone anywhere, but he also has a very successful ability to read NFL defenses and see how they're going to play him. And he knows pre snap, based off of how the defense is looking, where's that opportunity for us to get 3-4 yards? Because if they could just pick up that 3-4 yards every play, mathematically speaking, you should be getting first downs and eating time off the clock and eventually scoring 6 points at the end of the drive, which Kansas City has really perfected in 2022 and 2023 post Tyreek Hill after his departure to the Miami Dolphins. But of course, you also pair that with Kansas City using the draft picks that they got for Tyreek Hill, along with the cap space, the cap relief they got from Tyreek Hill's departure, to really bolster that defense, to really allow them to become a more well-rounded team. And we saw that these past 2 seasons where the Chiefs just became a juggernaut, where their defense is lights out, led by Steve Spagnuolo, the mastermind behind it, with star players such as Chris Jones, L'Jarius Sneed, George Karlaftis, Nick Bolton, Trent McDuffie. I mean, I could go on and on, Leo Chanel. But they've really taken their game to another level on defense. But Mahomes has maintained the standard that they've set on offense, even without Tyreek Hill. He's been able to maximize the receivers he's had, and his numbers, 2022, certainly his numbers were better. He still throws for over 5,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, just 12 interceptions, wins the MVP, of course, his second MVP. But then just this past year, numbers definitely take a dip. Just over 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns to 14 interceptions, finishes 7th in the MVP voting, with a 10-6 record as a starter. So really, while it is a step back statistically, I would say as a quarterback, he really took a step forward, especially when you look at the eye test and see what receivers he has around him. And that's what I mean when people do, like, it is easily for people to get swept up in the moment and see him throwing to Mecole Hardman and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Kadarius Toney, Noah Gray, Justin Watson, just these players who are not household names in terms of NFL receivers. Really, besides Travis Kelce, he really doesn't have, well, I should say this past year did not have an established go-to guy on his offense. So the fact that he was still able to muster up these numbers is quite impressive. But with that being said, we can also take a look at his postseason statistics, because this is really where he takes things to another level here. So looking at his playoff stats, yeah, this is really impressive. So he has 18 games started total. So this is just about the modern season. The modern NFL season is 17 games. This is just one more. So this is pretty much, if we look at these total career numbers at the bottom here, and just wanted to equate this to what a normal quarterback would play in a normal regular season. Wow, these are tremendous. I mean, these would probably be MVP type numbers if this was just a regular quarterback's regular season numbers for a given season. Over 5,000 yards, 41 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions, nearly 300 yards per game, and 5 fourth quarter comebacks, 6 game winning drives. This is really incredible stuff. And yeah, it's definitely should not be overlooked at all. In fact, I would say the exceptional players in the history of the game should take their game to another level come playoff time. If you do want to be considered one of the all-time greats, your play in the postseason should exceed your performance during the regular season, which I would say it absolutely does with Patrick Mahomes. And definitely the interesting narrative with him is that we really don't compare him to current quarterbacks because there really is no comparison. There's nobody that's even within the same stratosphere as Patrick Mahomes in terms of the younger quarterbacks in today's game. And when I say that, I mean guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, the more accomplished younger quarterbacks, even his division rival Justin Herbert. There really isn't much of a comparison there. Like, yeah, Lamar Jackson also has the two MVPs. Yeah, Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts have played in the Super Bowl. Yeah, Josh Allen probably puts up the best numbers besides Patrick Mahomes and definitely has the most well rounded skill set, I would say. The most three dimensional skill set, I should say, where his ability to throw the deep ball with accuracy as well as rush the ball for short and long gains. For Josh Allen, I'm saying, is unparalleled with any modern quarterback, or even historical quarterback, I should say, but none of them stack up to what Patrick Mahomes has achieved so far. So it is quite remarkable that we don't really compare him to any of those guys. We're comparing him to all time great NFL quarterbacks already. Um, so, with that being said, let's take a look at some of these raw numbers for the all time quarterbacks because I think that is ultimately what's holding him back at this point in time. So, looking at the all time, this is the passing yards all time leaders list. And the guys I have highlighted here are the players that when I did my top 10 quarterbacks list last summer, right before the season started, the guys I had on my top 10. So, just for a recap, it was Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Montana, Dan Marino, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas, Steve Young, Drew Brees, and John Elway to round things out. And this is all entirely subjective. That, of course, was my personal list, but I would like to think that most people would probably have some order of those 10 guys as their top 10. So just looking at how Patrick Mahomes stands up against them all time in terms of passing yards and passing touchdowns, we'll just look at those two to keep it nice, short, and sweet because really all that shows us, well, all it will show us when we look at these is what kind of longevity Patrick Mahomes is going to need to really stack up with these guys because it's easy to say, oh, well, he's on pace. You know, he's on pace if you were to play 18 seasons or 20 seasons to be the all-time passing yards leader and the all-time touchdowns leader. But as we know, any given Sunday in this National Football League, definitely any given season for sure, you don't know what's going to happen with injuries. You don't know what's going to happen with coaching changes, retirements, trades, signings. So much can happen that we really don't know what the future is going to hold. So until we see him climb this list for these all-time numbers, just these raw numbers, it's hard to say that he's outright the third best all-time, as I've seen very frequently post Super Bowl 58. And of course, having those 3 championship rings is massive for his legacy and his resume. And I do think that within the next few seasons here, we will see it become quite apparent that he is one of the top 10 quarterbacks of all time, if not top 5, top 3 quarterbacks of all time. But let's just look at these numbers real quick. And we could see Patrick Mahomes, he's currently number 65 all time in passing yards for the league, which is already really impressive. There really aren't too many current players ahead of him in that regard. Like I said a moment ago, there really aren't too many current players you can compare to Patrick Mahomes, but right now he has 28,000 passing yards. The first guy on my list was Steve Young with 33,000. Granted, Steve Young did have an insane rushing ability as well that really put his game over the top, on top of him sitting behind Joe Montana for a lot at the start of his career. So he really didn't have a chance to truly shine until he was already into his late 20s. But then we look at some of these other players, and you know what? We can even just show just our 10 guys here along with Patrick Mahomes. So next up would be Johnny Unitas and Joe Montana, both right around 40,000 yards. But again, these guys played in much different eras than Patrick Mahomes has played in. So I think the expectation for Mahomes, when all is said and done, he should be way past those guys. He should be up here with guys like Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady if he really wants to be considered one of the greatest of all time. And if he wants to be considered the greatest of all time, he really should be leading this list when all's said and done. But I think if he's able to get to maybe around like where Aaron Rodgers is here with like 59, like 60,000 passing yards, somewhere in there, around like Aaron Rodgers, Dan Marino, if he can get to that point, then you also take into account the success he's endured, the team's success he's endured, the MVPs, the offensive players of the year, the first team All Pros. Then it all starts to come together. And I mean, that's why when we say we can project the next few years out, um, hypothetically speaking, that could be within the next 5 years where he gets to that 60,000 yard mark. But we don't know. Injuries happen. I don't think anybody thought after Tom Brady went 18-1 in 2007 that he would just miss the entire next season in 2008. So anything can happen here. I don't think anybody thought Aaron Rodgers was going to miss all of last season with the Jets. I don't know if anybody thought Peyton Manning was going to miss all of 2011 when they lost to the Jets in that 2010 wild card game. If you would have said to the Colts fans leaving the stadium that, yeah, that was Peyton Manning's last game as a Colt, they would have looked at you like you had 20 heads. Like nobody knows what the future of this league has in store. Nobody could have foreseen Joe Montana getting injured in 1990 that basically forced him out of San Francisco and gave the job to Steve Young. So like I said, I think that's really what's holding him back. And we can look at the touchdowns here too, because Mahomes obviously excels here as well. And he's actually only 39th overall for all-time touchdowns, which is only 13 behind Steve Young. Granted, Steve Young did have a lot more rushing touchdowns to his name, but could look at the rest of these guys here. I mean, realistically, he theoretically could catch Joe Montana if he has an insane season this year. If he throws 55 touchdowns, he would actually surpass Joe Montana in 2024. But again, looking at the rest of these guys here, Tom Brady still has almost triple the touchdowns that Patrick Mahomes has all time. So to say that they're in the same conversation isn't really realistic to me at this point. And to say, and I know people aren't saying he's the greatest of all time right now. They're saying he's second greatest of all time or third. Um, but even looking at some of the more modern players on this list, right? We look at Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, all have over 5,500 touchdowns. 5,000 would be quite impressive. Aaron Rodgers is the only current player on this list here, so his story is still definitely being told. And I would imagine if he's healthy in 2024, Aaron Rodgers very likely crosses that 500 touchdown threshold as well. So looking at the bigger picture here, taking away just those 10 guys and looking at everybody, yeah, realistically, if he has another 25, 30 touchdowns next season, he would probably be right around the top 25 here with Tony Romo and Drew Bledsoe. Definitely some good company to be in. Dan Fouts right there as well. Sonny Jurgensen, some Hall of Fame names for sure. But I mean, yeah, realistically, within the next couple seasons, if he stays healthy, he could be right around John Elway here at 300 passing touchdowns. He could definitely be in this upper echelon of quarterbacks. And looking at this top 10 list here, top 12, 15, whatever you want to call it here, a lot of these guys did play in the 21st century, so I would expect him to be there. I don't think that's really something that we should pat him on the back for. I mean, it's definitely good. It's definitely a massive achievement. Don't get me wrong. It is incredibly difficult just to throw one touchdown at the National Football League level, but taking era into account, his numbers should be higher here. But granted, he has only played 6 seasons. There's still a ton of time, but that's why I think it is a little bit. I'd be a little bit hesitant to put him in the top 3 right now. I don't even know if I would put him in the top 10 right now. I do think I would absolutely put him at number 11 at the very least after these 10 guys. If we recall back to my top 10 quarterbacks last year, I did give a shout out to Warren Moon and Jim Kelly as my honorable mentions. And Patrick Mahomes is not far away from those guys at all in terms of the raw numbers. Um, then you pair in the two MVPs, the three Super Bowl championships, and especially the route they took to get to the Super Bowl this year. They went through, I would say, probably the four best teams in the National Football League this season, just from start to finish. The Miami Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, and the San Francisco 49ers. The fact that he took out, let's say the Kansas City Chiefs, the team led by Patrick Mahomes, took out those four teams in succession is definitely one of the most impressive postseason runs of all time, if not the most impressive. Because you have to remember, going into the playoffs, pretty much everybody thought we were on a collision course for a Baltimore Ravens, San Francisco 49ers Super Bowl. And then the Buffalo Bills were the team that everybody was saying, don't let the Bills into the tournament, don't let the Bills into the playoffs. Went on the road, took them out in his first playoff game, and that was the other narrative. The Chiefs can't win on the road in the playoffs. Patrick Mahomes has never played a road playoff game. Well, they beat the Bills and they beat the Ravens in back-to-back weeks on the road. So definitely a very impressive playoff run. But does that automatically make him top 3 of all time? I wouldn't necessarily say so, but would that put him ahead of pretty much any other name you could throw at me here? Yeah, I would say he is, even taking into account the raw numbers here, taking all other factors into consideration. Yeah, I would take him over a Phillip Rivers. I would take him over a Ben Roethlisberger, Matt Ryan, Eli Manning, Matt Stafford, Fran Tarkenton, Russell Wilson, Carson Palmer. Any name you want to throw at me, Dan Fouts, Eli Manning. Yeah, I already said Eli Manning. Any name you want to throw at me off of this list that's not highlighted, I would take Patrick Mahomes over them all time. I would absolutely say so. When you take all the accomplishments into consideration, all the adversity that his team has faced, that they've been able to overcome, because there are just a certain intangibles too, where I think that really was the most underrated aspect of Tom Brady was just his leadership in the locker room, the stuff we didn't see every day, the fact that he was able to will those 52 other men to victory week in and week out. But that being said, to bring this all together, let's look at the postseason numbers for these guys, because this is really where you can make that case that Mahomes is already top 3 of all time. So this is the one that everybody likes to look at, is the postseason wins all time, which Patrick Mahomes has 15, which is third all time, remarkably, behind just Joe Montana and Tom Brady. And in fact, if he just gets one more postseason win, he would match Joe Montana, which I would like to think he gets at least one more postseason win in his career. But like we said, we really cannot predict the future with this league. Anything can happen on any given Sunday, certainly any given season. But looking at his playoff record here, the fact that he has 15 wins in just 18 games is quite remarkable. Really, nobody even comes close to that. Terry Bradshaw is really the only guy that's close in terms of win percentage. He has 14 wins in 19 starts to Mahomes' 15 wins in 18 starts. But you do also have to take into consideration as well, a lot of these guys like Tom Brady, like, okay, if Tom Brady didn't have the first, well, if the postseason, I don't know how to word this properly. So if the postseason had 7 teams, I guess I should say, for all of Tom Brady's career, how many years was he the second seed where they got the first round bye, where they likely would have just rolled whatever 7 seed they played in the wild card round at Gillette Stadium, right? Would they have made the Super Bowl those years? I don't know. Maybe they end up finishing shorter, big picture, but maybe Tom Brady has more than 35 playoff wins if he had the luxury of the 17 postseason that Patrick Mahomes has had. But with that being said as well, there's really only one playoff win for Patrick Mahomes that was from that 2-7 matchup, and that was the 2021 wild card round against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because this season they did play in the wild card round, but that was a 3 versus 6 matchup. That would have happened any year regardless. 2022, last year, they got the first round bye as the 1 seed. 2020, with the 17 playoffs, they got the first round bye as the 1 seed. And then, of course, 2018 and 2019, that was under the 16 playoff format. So, yeah, maybe there could be some variance here if all these guys played with the 17 playoffs, but I do think that this is pretty accurate to assess these guys' teams, I should say, um, in terms of postseason success. So looking at the actual numbers for the quarterbacks here in terms of the yards, the touchdowns, the INTs, all the good stuff, the QBR. Tom Brady obviously leads the way here, but Patrick Mahomes is eighth all time in passing yards in the playoffs. Not that passing yards is the end all be all, but definitely quite impressive that he's already ahead of guys like John Elway, Dan Marino, Kurt Warner, Jim Kelly, Troy Aikman, Terry Bradshaw. These are all Hall of Fame type guys here that he's ahead of. And his story's still being written, so he very well could pass Drew Brees, Joe Montana, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger within the next few years here if they continue to sustain that postseason success, especially if they're going for the three-peat next year, like everybody on the Chiefs has been preaching in the week here following the Super Bowl. And definitely have to say, if they do end up becoming the first team to win three championships in a row, three Super Bowls in a row, 57, 58, and 59, paired with that Super Bowl 54 victory, man, that you might have to say the Kansas City Chiefs, they might be the greatest team in the history of the NFL. I know the Patriots won six titles, but that was over an 18-year span. If the Chiefs are able to win three in 3 years, and then you add in a fourth in 6 years, that's right there. And then that would certainly do a lot for Patrick Mahomes' ranking on this list as well. But looking at the touchdowns here, he's already fifth in all time passing touchdowns, and he's only four behind second place, a tie between Joe Montana and Aaron Rodgers, which maybe we could do one of these on Aaron Rodgers too, because Aaron Rodgers' story is also still being written, which I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about because he missed all of last season, of course, and he now is in his 40s. But I mean, if Aaron Rodgers has one more good postseason run in him, I think that really could elevate him to maybe being the second greatest quarterback of all time. I don't know. Like, he is definitely in that discussion as well. And I don't think his name's being brought up enough. I don't think Peyton Manning's name gets brought up enough in these conversations. I've said that for years, even before Tom Brady was anointed as the GOAT. I thought before, if we looked at like maybe like about 5 years ago, I think it would have been perfectly reasonable to say Peyton Manning was the greatest of all time. I think you could certainly make the case for it now, but definitely a lot more difficult with what Tom Brady accomplished in his 40s. Um, Staying on Patrick Mahomes, though, looking at the 41 touchdowns, while that is right in line with a lot of these other players, the thing that really stands out to me is the interceptions that go with it. Because, yeah, in today's modern NFL, sure, you're probably going to throw more touchdowns than Joe Montana did in the 80s. But what about the interceptions? Because even looking at some of these more modern players like Brett Favre and Peyton Manning, while, yeah, they threw 40 plus touchdowns, they both also threw 25 plus interceptions. In the case of Brett Favre, he actually threw 30. And these were guys who, I mean, yeah, they played more games than Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, but Brett Favre only had six more postseason starts. I find it very unlikely that in the next six postseason starts for Patrick Mahomes, if he's fortunate enough to get those, that he'll throw another 22 interceptions. That would be pretty outrageous. But then again, a lot of these were just from the 2001 divisional game against the Rams, where he threw an absurd amount of interceptions. It seemed like every time he dropped back, the Rams were catching the ball. But that's really what stands out to me here. If he's able to keep this going with the touchdowns and is able to keep these interceptions in check, man, like, this is where you look at it and say, yeah, he could really be up there. But I think right now, he's still outside the top 10 for me. It is very easy to get swept up in the moment and say, man, he is just something else. And believe me, I am as big of a Patrick Mahomes fan as anybody. I absolutely adore this guy's talent on the field and what he's done off the field, just how he's built his legacy in Kansas City, really uh, planted his stake in the ground there and said, this is where I'm going to do it with Andy Reid, Travis Kelce. This is where I'm going to start my family. He has a lot of local connections there, and he's just really, really crafting a legacy for himself as the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Kansas City Chiefs are the team of the 2020s, and that's what they're trying to build. And I really respect that. And I do think that while he's probably outside the top 10 right now, if he's able to keep this up for another 3 to 5 years, like within the next few seasons, it's going to become crystal clear that he is a top 5 quarterback of all time and probably a top 3 quarterback of all time. But like I said, there are some very elite names to get into that top 3 category to surpass guys like Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, and Aaron Rodgers specifically. I don't think I can have him ahead of those guys right now. And I know the argument of, oh, well, he has 3 championship rings. That Peyton Manning only had 2, and Aaron Rodgers only has 1. Well, there's a little bit more to it than that. But if Patrick Mahomes is going to get that little bit more these next few years here, if he's able to really just round out that resume, and if he continues to win championships and MVPs especially, by the time his career is done, we could be talking about him like Tom Brady, where there's just nobody within that same breath as him in terms of greatest quarterback ever. And that's what's so exciting about him, is to be able to watch this in progress, to watch him build this legacy. And that's how a lot of people felt about Tom Brady, I'm sure, during his career. I mean, I watched it happen. I wasn't really the biggest Tom Brady fan while he was playing. I can certainly appreciate his greatness in hindsight, but with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, I've really been able to sort of watch it in real time because I've loved watching him since he first stepped onto the field in 2018. He just took the league by storm, and to watch how this has grown and evolved over the years, it's really been a beautiful thing to watch, and I'm just excited to see where he takes it next. So, what do you guys think? Is Patrick Mahomes already a top 10 quarterback of all time? Is he not? Is he a top 3 quarterback of all time, like a lot of the pundits are claiming following the Super Bowl? And do you think the Chiefs will three-peat next year? Because I certainly believe that they will just come out next year guns blazing, especially if they get him another weapon or two on offense. I mean, man, we could be looking at maybe even an '07 Patriots type of situation here, if you want to say this was their 2006 this year, where Tom Brady was throwing to just absolute no names out there and still got them to the AFC Championship. If they go out and get him a Randy Moss this offseason and a Wes Welker, are they going to just take the league by storm next year? I don't know if they'll go 17-0. That would certainly be quite the feat. But I mean, hey, if they go like 14-3, 15-2, and then he wins his 3rd MVP, and then they get the three-peat, like, man, it's going to be hard to start to argue against him. And I'm not arguing against him. I'm his biggest fan, but let me know what you guys think about his career so far down below. Currently, I would have him outside of the top 10, but I'd be interested to hear what the discourse is on this. So look forward to talking to you guys in the next video, and have a nice day, everybody.